Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Nick Halaris Show. Our guest this week is Daniel Dorfman, the co-founder and CEO of the Roots Investment Community. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, Nick, how's it going? Thanks for having me. We're excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, man, I've been looking forward to this conversation. We've been since I started this podcast, we've been covering housing and the housing affordability crisis from many different angles. So we've had like everyone from civic activists who are pushing for development in urban places that is hard to develop to companies like yours who are attempting to provide alternatives to the traditional models of buying houses or renting apartments. And I feel like there's an army of people. The positive of it is there's an army of people who are working on the affordability um, issue in this country, and it's an optimistic story, but there's a lot of work to do. So I'm excited about what you guys are doing, and I'm glad that you guys are entering the fray or have entered the fray.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we're excited about it, and it's obviously a huge passion of ours to try to figure out ways to bridge that gap of affordability and provide a path for everybody to be successful in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. I figure the best place to start is just tell us about Roots and what are the different models you're pursuing in this fight to make America more affordable.
Yeah, so Roots is a privately held REIT that's available for non-accredited and accredited investors alike. And what makes our REIT special is that it's the first REIT that we know of and that we've, proven out, I believe, to be that delivers value in terms of growth of investment for both the investor and the renter. And our mission is really pretty simple. It's to give everybody the ability to build wealth through real estate. Our fund starts at $100 minimum. And the reason we place it at that number is we want to encourage participation. And we really see our fund as kind of a mezzanine product between renting and owning. When we looked at the market and kind of, I've been in real estate my entire career. When I was looking at it and we were thinking about how we could structure this to help with the affordability of units and really more with the idea of like, let's make sure everybody has the opportunity to, leverage this amazing wealth creation vehicle that is real estate. And there are so many amazing companies out there right now that focus on home ownership and like what that means and down payment assistance, all these like great tools once you're a homeowner. But we really didn't see too many products out there that really focused on let's build wealth through this asset class while you're a renter. And that's what we kind of took it out as a unique approach to doing that.
Yeah, which I think is really cool because the hypothesis around like, hey, everyone's focused on the homeowner, I think is definitely true. And in my view, America has become this really sort of binary place, and it's determined on whether or not you end up in the ownership of real estate category. Like if you do, then your financial outcome is significantly better than if you don't. And so like there is a problem. There's an ownership problem in the country, and the Bush administration, this is go back in time, they were attempting to create an ownership society, and then they inadvertently created like the biggest housing bubble in history. And ever since then, the home ownership rate has basically been on the decline. Like there's been little surges up, but it's sort of broken. And so we are in a world where people are going to rent. And so it's cool that you're innovating in that space. Tell me about the product. Like how does it work for a renter, and how can they participate in ownership?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is we believe that, partners in our buildings and in our assets are better than tenants. And so we invite every resident who lives with us to have the opportunity the first thing we ask them is, hey, if you'd like to, instead of having a traditional security deposit held with us, you can actually make an investment into the fund for that value. So from day one, if a resident moves in with us, they have the opportunity to, not all of them select it. And we can talk about that maybe a little later, but they have the opportunity to place that value, usually 1 month's rent, into the fund. And so from day one, when they move in, They've got partial ownership of the home that they live in, but also of the portfolio overall. They get to participate in the appreciation and the distributions, all those things that, build wealth. And so that's step number one. And then the following steps are we really want to encourage renters who are renting with us to be great partners. And we've kind of narrowed that down to three things, which we call the live in it like you own it program. So we want our residents to live in it like they own it, right? And part of that is from a 90-day count from when they move in. We'll check at the end of that 90 days, hey, have you paid rent on time? That's check number one. Check number two is be a good neighbor. So no lease violations is essentially that check. And then the third thing we ask them to do is we ask them to actually do a video of the inside and outside of the unit and to give us a survey of feedback of where we are. And the reason we ask for that video isn't necessarily to see if their stuff's out a little messy or anything like that. What we noticed over years of being in real estate is there are little items that renters don't perceive as big issues because they don't necessarily bother them. Maybe it's a leak, pinhole leak underneath a sink. Maybe it's the discoloration of the ceiling that they don't really know is actually a leak. And we're just trying to encourage them to report those issues because usually they're $100 fixes today, and they're $3,000 to rip out cabinets and do all those things when they move out. So that's really our way of saying, hey, help us see what's going on in the property. And the other thing that happens when they start to learn how to do those videos is they start to become knowledgeable about home ownership, right? Because it's something that they've never really had to pay attention to before. Hey, it's broken, just call the landlord kind of gig. And, bringing awareness to those little things, so many of our residents are like, I didn't even know that was a big deal. My gutter's full, who cares? And it's like, well, totally get it. You wouldn't normally, but gutter's full, it's going to overflow back into the house. And, these are the types of steps. And, what's happened is just a very unique partnership where we're all learning from each other and creating better assets for the fund. And, to wrap that up, at the end of that 90 days, if they paid rent on time, be a good neighbor and do their video, we actually drop another $150 on average into that investment account for them. So, just for living with us, paying rent on time, doing those 4 videos, they're going to get $600 on top of the growth of the traditional fund. So it really, starts to compound after a few years where, 3 to 5 years, you could have, anywhere from, $4,000 to $6,000 with us. And you go and make that decision maybe to move out and go move into a home with a little cushion versus, today and every other rental scenario that I know, you're just, that money's gone. So
Just
that's
definitely gone. Yeah. Let's talk about the security deposit one first, because I love that idea. I feel like just from a finance 101, it's a no-brainer. What is the uptake? Like you mentioned in your answer that people don't always say yes. Like what percentage of people are saying yes?
So on the initial component, about 60%.
Okay.
And what we recognize is, I'm a landlord. I've been a property owner, but there's a non-trust relationship that goes into a landlord-tenant relationship, and so, without without blaming them at all, like I get it, right? There's no trust there, so asking you to invest with us from day one sometimes is a little bit like, you know what, let's take the baby steps. So what we'll see often is someone will elect, hey, I want to be in the program, which they still get the $600, even if they put their security deposit in a normal account with us in a traditional model, they still get $600 a year to build wealth, which is pretty good. And so what we'll see is after about 6 months and after they've done it, we'll reach back out and say, hey, at any point, if you do want to talk about it and kind of enter into that, like, wealth building or real estate investing mindset, let us know. And a lot of times they'll say yes after, 6 months or so of living with us. And once we've proven to them that we're going to do what we say we're going to do, right? And, that's the key to any relationship. You got to give a little bit and in order to ask for anything, right? So
Yeah, that's a good point. And I agree with your point about the sort of distrust. I found investing in places like Los Angeles and Atlanta, which are very different in the sense of like the regulatory regime that's in place. There's greater distrust out here actually. Like if you're a property
wow,
owner in Los Angeles, because of all the rent control laws and the different disclosure requirements and the city departments that are designed to sort of get you it's a bunch of got you type moments for property owners. The renters are on edge. And so my hypothesis would be that the uptake would be even lower in the rent control city. I'd be curious to see what happens as you expand your portfolio.
that's
But
really interesting. I would not have thought of it that way, but it does make sense that, you know, in a more, I'll call it a litigious or, you know,
yeah,
kind of rent control state, that's going to be an interesting model for us to flush out.
yeah, these regimes are well intentioned, right? Like it's attempting to address through the power of government, attempting to address the housing affordability, but it creates an unnecessarily antagonistic relationship between property owners and renters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's the subject for another day. So on the security deposit program, it starts off at 60 and maybe ends up significantly higher. Is everyone eventually
Yeah,
signing up, or is it?
I would say we get up to we're at about 73 on the total
Okay.
portfolio. You know, sometimes it shakes out that resident didn't participate in that, you know, partnership
Yeah.
period, right? Which we see at about 10% of all residents aren't participating in it. And so that shakes out a little bit too. So
Okay, interesting. So in the second program, the Live It Like You Own It, there's roughly 10% of people who basically don't send the video or whatever. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
That's actually not that bad though.
That that's the number that shocked me, honestly.
Yeah.
So we have about yeah 90% of our residents that do the video and have the you know and have sorry no lease violations, and then usually the moment in which they don't get their rebate is paid on time or you know paid up rent, and that's just
Yeah.
is what it is in this in what we do, right? But the amount of people who are engaged in the program is shocking. You know, we are every quarter we grow our asset count, and we have always stayed between 80 and 85% of our renters getting the full rebate, which means that they are paying on time. They are doing these videos, and what we're seeing is they're staying longer, right? Like our renewal rate is about 84% right now. I think industry average in our you know SFR asset class is about 64. So we feel really good about those numbers, and you know I think that will continue to grow as we continue to have people who are more drawn to our programming and less you know drawn to like just renting a property, if that makes sense. So we're seeing
Yeah.
a uptick in folks who are like, hey, I want to build wealth while I rent. When do you guys have something coming up? Which is a world we envisioned, but not a world we kind of really expected, you know, to take
Yeah.
place yet. So
That's fascinating. And that 84% number is incredible. And in my experience, I've been investing in multifamily in Atlanta since 2011 and simultaneously doing it in LA. And it's like a tale of two cities when it comes to renewals. People in California, they tend to never move
mm-hmm.
because they're either protected by a rent control regime or they're afraid to lose out on a unit that's priced lower than the market. And so turnover is like really low here. But in Atlanta, its averages 50% a year, something like that in our experience, which it sounds like it's pretty close to the average that you just mentioned, which was what, 64,
Yep.
or maybe more like 35% people leaving. But that turnover creates a huge expense consequence. And so if you can reduce turnover by such a huge percentage, it's got to mean that your properties are sort of outperforming the market. What are you seeing in terms of the benchmarks on your single family rentals, for example, on expense ratios?
Yeah, so I mean, we feel like we're, in a really good spot. We always have room for improvement. The resident programming though does help us just identify those issues much faster. When we look at our portfolio purchases or anything that we're purchasing, um, it's pretty easy as an operator after you've done it for long enough to understand like, hey, when the roof's going to go out, when have an idea around these big repair costs. What's always made real estate challenging is the unknown move out cost, the turn cost. And then on top of that, it's turn cost plus turn time. That's where, we've really been able to, hammer efficiency in our portfolio. With that though, I will say we repair a lot more frequently, right? So we feel like we're keeping up with the properties probably at a better and more efficient clip. With some more smaller repairs to outweigh the bigger ones down the line. But
I see.
yeah,
Okay, so that makes sense because as a function of the 90 days check in, it spurs some proactive maintenance that would not be seen on the benchmark
that's right.
portfolios. Yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense. In the long run, though, it's got to be better.
It for us the like gold star metric is renewal, right?
Yeah.
Because right now, like if you look at someone's turn costs, if I ask you what your portfolio turn costs are, you're going to tell me a number, and then we're going to have to go through our general ledger and understand what we charge as turn, what you charge as turn, and it's a very hard number to really get to a comparison at. We can compare to what we had previously versus what we have now, like in our own portfolios. So really the number we like to focus on is renewal, right? Because if you're renewing with us, there isn't a turn. And there isn't that moment of, what we're about to get into, which is, after Thanksgiving, your leasing kind of dies in Atlanta, at least. I don't know how LA is, but it is, you're pretty much shelving that unit until the new year. So it's really nice to know, hey, the more people we get to stay, the less we have to worry about that market fluctuation in terms of renting and leasing cycles.
Yeah, it's true. California does not have the same seasonal problem that Atlanta does,
Mm,
but it's so right. A lot of the country actually operates the way Atlanta does, where there's a window. There's a window for renting, and if you miss it, people don't understand. This is why it's hard to be a small property owner because it's existential, right? Like, let's say you owned one single family rental, and it happened to become vacant on October 1st, and you didn't get someone in the next 30 days because you had to do some cleanup. You're gonna miss like 5 months, which percentage wise is enormous. And so the expected return that you thought you were going to get just gets wiped out by that vacancy period. And now, obviously, if you own thousands of units, it kind of spreads itself out and it works. But it's really hard to build from the ground up and have a small portfolio. You really need the scale.
yeah, I kind of cut my teeth in real estate doing just that, having kind of, bought our own first kind of couple properties and then actually ended up opening a brokerage here in Atlanta. But the amount of folks who kind of think like, hey, I'm going to buy one property or even two and like realistically think they're going to cash flow is just, it's pretty hard to do. It's a very, as such a low margin business, and big repairs in these single family houses and duplexes eat your entire cash flow for, a year, right? Like you lose an AC in the first 2 years or one of these big repairs and you're probably going to be pretty tight,
Yeah.
even with full vacancy,
Yeah.
so
Totally.
or occupancy. So
Yep.
yeah, it's part of like why we love the portfolio access that we try to give folks is, look, like, you're really, if you're investing in real estate house, like as like a personal level, you're probably really looking at the appreciation play, right? And the advantages in terms of like kind of the value, and maybe you have kind of some of those synthetic transactions that everybody likes to create with leverage, but really the cash flow aspect is, folks should know it's pretty much non-existent, I think, and
Yeah.
for anything less than five. So
Yeah, it almost never materializes. And I meet a lot of people, like people in life are constantly reaching out to me about their real estate dreams. And over the years, I've sort of changed the answer that I give because I've had so much personal pain dealing with these situations, and also seen some people that I gave advice to, which turned out to be bad. I'm like, yeah, just go start buying properties. That was kind of one of my early pieces of advice that I gave people maybe like a decade ago, because that's how I started.
It was
But
probably pretty good advice at that point, though. Like,
it probably, yeah, I guess
give it a
timing
good
wise,
run.
it was great advice. Yeah. But it's really, it's painful because you have these plans and you have opportunity costs. Like, right, those people that I gave advice to 10 years ago also could have bought the NASDAQ, the QQQs, and they would have made 30% a year or whatever it's returned. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's no joke. Like, you have to really think about, and owning real estate and earning an actual return on it is difficult. So, which is why what you're doing is cool. Let's talk about the scale. Like, how big are you? Maybe we start with how much money have you raised, or how many properties, wherever you want to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started the fund officially opened 3 years ago. Um, in that time, when we first opened the first year, we were pen and paper, kind of signing up investors, and you know we built our own proprietary platform where everybody can invest through investwithroots.com. Now that is very simple to use, similar to kind of like an Acorns or like a Robinhood type, environment. And so from in the last 3 years, we've grown from like 50 investors to a community of over 50,000 people and 8,500 of them being invested. We've raised a little over 44 million in total, and about, I think, over 20 of that has been in the last year. Um, and property count wise, we've got 360 doors.
Okay. Three, and most of those are single family rentals, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so did you start buying properties, these rental properties, with your own funds to begin with? Like, how did the beginning of it start?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I've been in real estate since 2009, kind of investing personally. And I kind of just lucked into it, honestly. I had another job that had a little bit of, I got a bigger check size, or, in that position, and needed somewhere to put it. And I put it into real estate, which ended up being an incredible experience and a great, learning curve. I just love the asset. And basically from 2009 to 2017, I did it on the side and built up my own personal portfolio with my wife. And then in 2017, we started a brokerage here in Atlanta, grew that team out, and my wife runs that operation right now. And through that, just had a lot of learning opportunities in terms of property management, in terms of, buying, selling, tenant management. And then, at the end, we started doing a lot of syndication and kind of partnership deals, which gave us this little eye into investor management, which is another element that's, something that a lot of people don't talk about when getting into the syndication and the partnership agreements. And so throughout that, 2020 kind of hit, and we just kind of had that moment of like being able to kind of reconcile what we'd learned and understand like what impact we really wanted to make. And a big thing that we were noticing, or that I was feeling pretty heavy about, is, along the lines of this podcast, which is our rents are becoming unaffordable, to be honest. Like, our portfolio is becoming unaffordable for, a lot of people. The housing, purchasing a house was absolutely, not even existent for some of our residents, most of them. And, we originally looked at the market and said, hey, let's just bring something into our portfolio that helps these residents be able to achieve more. And I just did not find a product that I felt comfortable putting in front of our residents. A lot of the rent to own like stuff just wasn't, I don't know what it's converting at today, but it was not converting very well 3 years ago. I can tell you that. And, so when we went to create this, I had been fortunate enough to have a book of investors, about 150 different people that I'd worked with over the years, and we had done deals together. And the first kind of reach out to these individuals was, hey, look, like, we've done deals together. We love real estate. You guys have trusted me before. Um, where we used to make 15, if we made 12% this year, but 3% went to the resident to try and help kind of bridge this gap. Would you be okay with that? And a lot of people who are credited in my list said, you know what? Yeah, that sounds like it actually might work. Gave me a shot to go. We went, bought some properties. We learned a lot around, what, less about the property itself, right? Because we had done that a lot. We had not done a lot of resident engagement, right? We had not done a ton around really communicating and really making sure and involving that resident in the process, which is different, right? So like we had a lot of learning to do around what that person really wanted or, even cared about. And, I think a lot of people sit and they invent these ideas in their head about like how to save individuals in different scenarios. And I think that's amazing. And I applaud that. And that's what we did. But like, if you had asked, like we went in there and we're like, hey, you're going to get to invest. No, they don't. Like that's not a concern when you are trying to put food on your table. Right. And so a lot of those learnings were less about property and more about people. And so, we spent the first 12 to 18 months really perfecting that, buying properties as we could as a Reg D fund or accredited investor fund. And then once we felt like we had the model down and we really were able to, do this proficiently at scale and had proven that, partners in our buildings made better returns, that's where we started to get really excited and started to layer in this, Reg A fund, which is what we are, which gives us the ability to be, offered to accredited and non-accredited investors.
Yeah. And just a quick question on the Reg A side. So I had a woman who is Atlanta actually, Dara Albright. She is on the board of a similar kind of company, like a mission-driven fintech company called Worthy. And their product is a fixed income alternative for investors, but you can buy it in very small chunks. So you can buy in like $10 increments. So similar to yours. And she's we did a whole episode. You should listen to the episode and I'll introduce you to them. They're very cool. They've created fixed income and they're essentially funding fix and flip investors. That's how they're sort of producing the return to back the fixed income side of it.
Cool.
But she talked a lot about how the SEC process was no joke. She's been working on crowdfunding for like over a decade. So she's been in this game for a long time. But what was it like to get the Reg A fund set up? Was it tough?
A lot of work. Yeah. I had not been working in the crowdfunding space for 10 years. And, we were fortunate enough to have some really, really good mentors who had done a Reg A. Particularly the guys from Jamestown, one of those gentlemen over there they had been through the process. They helped us, get some introductions to their, accounting teams and the people that they used and worked with. And, it was no joke. Like it took a year. So, and the cost is crazy, right? Like it's not, if you don't have a way or a path to, what we hope to, in our goal is, hundreds of thousands and then millions of users on this platform. That's really the way that, economically it works. Without that, your return is going to be pretty challenged.
Just because of the upfront regulatory cost of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people, you mentioned something like 8,000 investors? How many of those are residents?
Only of our residents are about 350.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Of those, we don't have hard numbers, but we estimate about 70% of those 8,000 are renters, though, which is exciting for us, right? Because that's we can only impact so many with the doors that we own. But if we can give renters across America this opportunity to say, hey, $100 a month on top, like, isn't as stressful, obviously, and I can make this incremental savings and be a participant in the real estate space. Um, that's kind of the goal as well, right? Like, we can provide that vehicle to those folks as well.
Yeah, very cool. It makes me optimistic. I've been talking to a lot of social impact investors on the podcast as well, and there's sort of a negative narrative in that world where there's a lot of people who claim to be social impact investors, but essentially are demanding that their entrepreneurs produce them returns that are exact same as market. So like in real estate, like you said, like give me a 15 IRR and I'm in all day long. But it sounds
Right.
like there's a lot of people who are willing to look for 12 and happy to give the 3 away, which that's exciting.
Yeah, I think so. We've been able to do better than that at the fund. We've averaged above 16% annually still because of the operation efficiencies that we get. But at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of folks that, see the problem that we're having across the country. And, this is the cool thing about what we've done, especially not to get political in a world that we're in right now, where it feels like it's, you're this way or that way, and there's no kind of in between anymore. This is something that everybody can get behind, right? Like, it doesn't matter what aisle or side or whatever you believe in. This is, affordability and having some house security, and moving folks into a position where they can feel comfortable and be able to, hopefully one day take that step into home ownership is something I think everybody can agree on. And, it's we're we're seeing that every day, and it is uplifting, honestly, compared to what
Yeah.
we are reading.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, really, people don't understand. I mean, people do. Some people do, but America is is one place for the people who own things, and whether those, whether it doesn't necessarily mean a home, but that's sort of probably the main asset that you want to get into the ownership stream as soon as possible. But it's stocks and everything, and a lot of the advantage and the wealth inequality and the privilege and all the things that are sort of driving our culture to this point of, it feels like it's breaking apart, is determined on this one financial metric. Do you own any assets or not?
Yep.
And if the answer to the question is yes, then you have a different life in America. It's dramatically different and it's amazing. And so you have all these advantages. And so it's cool that you guys can, begin to give opportunities for people. And it sounds like it's going to grow. Like, what's your vision? Like, how many people are you trying to serve?
Yeah. So our near term being maybe, our hope is by end of 2028, we've got 1 million people on here building wealth with us, and starting to recognize that component that you just mentioned, which is something we see in our residents all the time, right? Our residents, the average renter in America today has less than $600 in savings. For our residents who opened up an account that says, "Hey, I've got $2,300 and it's invested," that's a starts to help with what facilitate that "Hey, I can do it" attitude, right? Like, it's small to some, but it's big in the way of like, "Hey, I've got an investment. I am an owner." Not everything has to be these like huge crypto style wins. It's like, just having that account that says my name on it and says I invest in, own a little bit of real estate is, that's a feeling that we want to give everybody. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a financial education component to what you're doing. I'm curious, you mentioned this earlier when you were describing sort of the evolution of the company and said that it took a couple years to kind of figure out the right way to approach residents about this. Like, what are some of the things that you discovered in those conversations around this, financial literacy, financial education? What were some of the key findings?
yeah, I think the biggest one was you can't, and this is actually something my father told me pretty much always growing up, which was you can't ask more of a relationship than you've given, right? And you know, we would go into these scenarios where a lot of cases we were buying this house. Our first property set was in Austell, Georgia, which is about 20 minutes. You're probably decently familiar with it. It's a very small town. This set of duplexes had been owned by, for lack of a better word, just a slumlord for about 20 years. And some of these individuals have been there for 20 years. And, you walk in with this, smile on your face and try and say, hey, you're going to get to invest in real estate with us. It's not that they laugh you out of the door. It's that the things that you're like, we're not even on the same, we haven't even communicated to a level of like, hey, why don't, so what we learned was go in, fix something in the house, help do something, like, especially for people that we didn't bring in with the knowledge of this program, which that helped a ton. But like, really the inherited resident, like we learned, like go in and fix something, right? Like help with one of the problems that maybe that last landlord didn't, or, or that's been ignored, that maybe wasn't even, sometimes we'll fix things that sometimes landlords are awesome, but they'll choose not to improve the paint somewhere or something, improve something. And we'll just go and do that, right? We'll do something, try to do something small to be able to make sure they understand we're here for more than just like your financial success, which, I think when you say, I want to help you succeed financially, I think a lot of people look at it and say, what's in it for you? Right. And that's a fair question, right? The success of that resident does help us succeed. And so we learned a lot of that too, which is like, look, I'm gonna be open with you. This helps us, right? Like it does, right? Your success does help us, and hopefully it helps you too. And so like, that's kind of the, making sure to, like, the biggest learning is just kind of meet people where they are, right? And don't just ask for stuff that you haven't earned the trust to get.
Yeah. And it sounds like the transparency around the financial transaction. I feel like even highly educated people are so wary. There's so many stories of people getting scammed or taken advantage of by crappy financial products in our system that everyone is kind of on edge, and it's probably dialed up, especially for someone who's renting and who has, very in a financially insecure position, like only $600 of savings or something like that. It's probably on edge where they think they're inclined to be taken advantage of at any moment.
Yeah. And, I'll add to that with, there's a lot of landlord and property managers don't even talk to their residents.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no conversation, right? There's a lot of like, you called me out here, I'm going to fix it, pay your bill, you're late, and to even introduce a conversation about anything other than those four, like, fundamental rental to landlord relationship components is a little shocking, and it was shocking for us, right? And we're out there like trying to figure out how to do it, right? Like there's, it's a different, it's not a relationship where you are typically talking in more than, just a few things. And so that's been a really fun aspect of it.
That's cool. So I interviewed a woman, Yasmina Zaidman, from a company called Acumen, which if you haven't heard of Acumen, you should look them up as soon as we finish this podcast, because they could be a potential partner for you financially. But Acumen started like 20 something years ago, and they're attempting to do something very similar to you in the sense that they're trying to provide opportunities for ownership in the places where like no one's having any opportunities for ownership. So places in Africa and India where if you don't happen to be in the ultra elite, like life is challenged. And so they've actually done an incredible work over like 20 years investing in entrepreneurs in these far off places, and
That's cool.
had success with it. And Yasmina talked about this same thing, about how they would come into these places with these plans of like, oh, I want to save this community from the oppression that and then they realized they had to kind of slow themselves down and actually go and talk to people and find out what's really happening in this community. And then actually find a way to encourage entrepreneurial activity. And so it's a similar story, and you should listen to that episode when it comes out in a few weeks.
I will. I'm excited. You know, I think we talked a little bit before the show, but it's extremely like uplifting to watch what others have. You know, we're a pretty small fund in the end of the day right now, and to watch others have carved the way and really made these opportunities possible for all. Hats off to those folks. So it's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
you're small, but the opportunity is huge because ultimately real estate is a relatively conservative asset class. And so like Acumen's been at it for 20 years and they invested something like 250 million,
Oh
right?
well.
Like, which is amazing. But you guys could, in the right scenario, put together a real estate portfolio just in Atlanta and easily surpass that in terms of the amount of dollars, because real estate's expensive. And so the potential to open up ownership opportunities is pretty large, doing what you're doing, which I'm sure that it keeps you guys excited as you do this work.
It does, absolutely. Awesome.
Well, amazing. Well, I really appreciate the time you shared today. I'm looking forward to getting this episode out into the world and keeping track of your progress. Thank you, Daniel, for taking the time.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Nick. We appreciate being on here and the support you've given us. So thanks, man.
Thank you very much.